So in this video, we're going to take a look at exporting out art assets from Mudbox to bring into a game engine such as Unity. There are a couple different things that we're going to be exporting out. We're going to be exporting out a collision mesh, a mesh that will be visible in the game level, and we will also be exporting out a number of different textures. So there are a couple things that we should take note of. Uh, we have a number of different levels because I've upped the subdivisions on my mesh here. So we have everything from a level 0 at 312 faces to a level 7 at over 5 million faces. If I were to use my page down, and go to level 0 at 312 faces, obviously this resolution is not going to have the details that we want, but this will be really perfect as a collision mesh in our game engine. I'm going to go page up to a little higher resolution, and this one is at 1248. I may choose to export either this one or this one as the mesh in the game engine. So it really comes down to what creates the proper silhouette on my mesh. If I can get away with the lower resolution mesh, then that's what I'm going to use. Finally, if we go all the way up to the highest level, level 7 at over 5 million, this is way too dense to really bring into Maya or into a game engine. But this work that was put into all the details, all the sculpting details in here, is not wasted, because what we'll do is export out what is called a normal map, and then that will be a way that we'll be able to get all these fine details in our game engine as well. In addition to meshes, we will also be exporting out some our textures. And currently I only have textures in the diffuse, but we could also have other textures in here for specularity, for example, that we might also need to export out. What I'd like you to take notice here is that I actually have 3 diffuse layers. I only want to export out one color map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on diffuse, and I am going to collapse these textures. So actually I clicked on this paint layer here, and I'm going to look for the option here. Here it is, merge visible. So if I click on merge visible, it will combine all my color maps, in this case, to this single layer. So let's go ahead and start exporting. Now, the first thing we'll export out will be our collision mesh. And I'm going to go page down to take a look at it. At 312 faces, it's not very dense, but it'll give us enough resolution for providing collision in the game engine. I'm going to select the mesh here in my object list, and I will go to File, Export Selection. I will navigate to where I'm going to be saving it to, and I'll go ahead and give it a name as well. I'm going to call it Stone Arch Collision, and I'll say Save. Next, I'm going to export the actual mesh that we'll be seeing in the game engine. Now, remember that we don't want to export out our highest resolution one, in other words, in this case, the one that's over 5 million polygons. That's really excessive. It'll slow things down. So I think I will go down to we'll try level 2 at almost 5,000 polygons, and we'll export out that one. So once again, I'll select it here in the object list, go to File, Export Selection, and we'll call this one Stone Arch Mesh. Let's take a look at what we've just exported out. So far we have two FBX files. We've got the collision and the mesh. And then when we did the export, it also created these folders here. I'm going to go into the Stone Arch Mesh folder here. And what you'll notice is that my texture for the object is in that folder, the texture that will be applied to the mesh. Back in Mudbox, there are a couple things I want to point out before doing the next very important step, which is going to be exporting out the normal map. So remember that we're dealing with a number of different meshes here. We've exported out level 0 at 312 faces for the collision. We've exported out level 2 at almost 5,000 faces for the actual mesh that we'll be seeing in the game engine. So how are we going to use level 7 at 5 million, at over 5 million faces? Well, we're going to use that to create what is called a normal map. I'm going to go ahead and do page up and go to my high resolution mesh. Perhaps I'll also just come over here to edit and deselect all so that we can see it a little bit better. And then what I'm going to do is go to render, or sorry, UV maps, UVs and maps, and we're going to go to extract texture maps, new operation. In here we will select normal map, and we have to tell it what our target model is. And if you remember, we determined that level 2 was going to be the mesh that we're going to actually see. So that's the mesh that we need to click on this drop down and select. Then we have to determine what model we're going to use to extract our normal map from. And in this case, we typically want our highest resolution mesh. In this case, it's our arch level 7, so I'll leave that as it is. A couple other settings in here that we can adjust. We can change the image size. Currently it's at 1024 by 1024. That's the size the normal map will be. We can choose other dimensions. I'm going to choose, for this example, 2048 by 2048 just to give it a little more resolution. I will also turn on anti-aliasing. Compatibility, Maya Softimage, we'll keep it at that. We'll also keep this coordinate space on tangent. We need to give our normal map a name and tell it where to save it to. So I'm going to click on this button here with the 3 dots on it, and we'll navigate to where we're going to save this to. Here it is. Perhaps I'll go ahead and just put it with the other textures, which is in this folder here. Make sure you know where you're saving it to. And we'll call this one Stone Arch Normal. And with all that set, we'll click on the Extract button. And I'm not sure what this message is telling us here, but we'll go ahead and just go with it and see what happens. One thing you'll notice here is that actually our mesh in Mudbox has also changed. Everything is more pronounced here. The reason for that is if we go to our layers paint layer, you'll notice that it has actually applied the normal map to the mesh. If we deselect that, we'll no longer have that effect of the normal map being overlaid onto our textures and mesh. In fact, let's see what happens if we step down to our level 2. And this is our level 2 mesh along with the normal map. As you can see, it gives the illusion of there being that detail that actually isn't there. And we can verify that by, I'm going to turn off the diffuse map, but I'm also going to turn off the normal map. And you'll see that that sculpted detail actually doesn't exist there. This is just a texture trick to give the illusion of there being more modeling than there actually is. So let's take a look at what that normal map actually looks like. We're back in this folder here where I've exported out my mesh as well as my collision mesh. And then in this folder here, I have my textures. I have both my color texture. And this is my normal map. This is the map that gives the illusion of there being more modeling than actually exists on the actual mesh. So for those of you that are in my class, what are you going to be giving me? You're going to be giving me your textures. If you have a color texture, you'll give me that. You also give me specularity texture if you have that, but I don't have that with this example. You'll also be giving me your normal map. You'll be giving me your collision FBX, and you'll be giving me your mesh FBX. The next thing I'm going to do now is demonstrate how we can set this up in Unity to work as a game asset. So here we are in Unity now, and I have this very simple level here with an environment. I'm going to zoom in into the environment. You see we have a rocket here, we have a little guy standing in front of the rocket, and we've got this kind of lunar landscape here. Now I'm going to bring my stone arch into this level here and into Unity. This is very easy to do. I've already created a folder for myself here, and all I need to do is drag these assets into this folder here. So I've got my stone arch collision and my stone arch mesh. I'm going to simply drag them in here. And then I'm also going to drag in those two texture files, the normal map and the color map. And now we'll start setting it up in Unity. The first thing I'm going to do is select this is the stone arch collision. I can see I have it selected, and that's what it says, stone arch collision here in the inspector. If I select this one, this is my stone arch mesh. I'm going to drag one of these into my environment here. And we'll zoom in on it. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a new material. You can see that it has a material on it already. In fact, if we expand on it, this is the material that's been applied. But I'm going to create a new material in Unity, and I'm going to do that simply by right-clicking in this folder here, and we'll go to Create Material. This will be my new material, which I'm going to rename. and I'll apply it to my arch here. As you can see, I can change the color of it, but I can also take my color map and apply it to the texture simply by dragging it onto the albedo property of my material. And here it is. Next, I'm going to apply the normal map. And you'll see that there's actually a place to do that as well. Here it is, normal map. So I'll select my normal map, drag it over onto the normal map property of my material and drop it. One thing you should take note of is that it says this texture is not marked as a normal map, and there's a button that says Fix Now. I'll go ahead and click on that. And now it is using my normal map as a map to create the bump property on my arch. I'm going to bring down this smoothness here so that it's not as specular. You see, if I bring it up, it becomes more specular, more shiny. If I bring it to the left, it becomes more matte. We'll leave a little bit of specularity on it, maybe something like that. And here's our arch. Let's test it out. Run over to it. And we can take a look at some of the normal maps on it and how they're giving the illusion of this being a rough surface with lots of fine sculpting on it. One thing to take note of, though, is that we haven't set up the collision. So now I can run through the object itself. Let's go and set up the collision. There are a number of different ways of setting up collision. We're going to be using our collision mesh, but I'll show you a couple other things with that. Typically, we want the collision to be as simple as possible. So if we can get away with simple polygon primitives, we'll use simple polygon primitives as our collision. I have my arch selected. I'm going to, in the inspector, go to Add Component, Physics, and we'll just apply a box collider to it first to take a look at that. You'll see that it's created a box collider for it. Oftentimes this is adequate for creating collision for our meshes. Once again, if I play it and run over to this arch, oh, I knocked over my rocket here. It looks like I'm not returning to Earth. You'll see that now I can't run through it. However, I also cannot run under it because it is using a box collider. So that's where our collision mesh will come in handy. I'm going to get rid of this, this box collider here, and I'll go back to Add Component, Physics, but this time we'll use a mesh collider. Currently it's set to use itself, but it'll run more efficiently if we use a mesh that is less high polygon, and that's why we exported out our collision mesh. So what I'll do is under Mesh here, I'm going to click on this little button here, and I will find my collision mesh. Here it is, right here. at 367 verts, and we'll apply that. So currently you can actually see the mesh along with its higher polygon mesh. The collision mesh won't be visible, but we won't be able to run through it. So let's go ahead and try it out. Very hard to try to land on it. But there it is. And one of the benefits, of course, of setting up one of our art assets in Unity is that we can then create it as a prefab and then use it after doing all that setup of setting up the collision, creating the materials, all that kind of stuff. We can create a prefab then, which will allow us to drag multiple instances of our work into a scene or into other scenes. We can rearrange them, we can scale them up or scale them down. We can do all sorts of stuff with them. And that's it for this video. I'll see you all later.